introduce our guest speaker, a woman whose fame precedes her. She has a wonderful record of amazing gifts, and today we are lucky enough to partake of them. Please give a warm welcome to Reverend Ann Gehman.
Thank you and good afternoon. I'm so impressed with the way Diane facilitates the meeting, and it was very interesting to hear your remarks, your stories. And I was reminded of an atheist friend of mine who doesn't believe in anything, and he would answer your question, why are you here? He would say, because we're not all there. But I know that we are all here because of our intense interest in what awaits us as a common experience into our future. What will our lives be like when we make that transition into the spiritual realm, into that next dimension of life? I believe that NDEs are indeed a window into that experience. Would you agree? For those of you who've had your experiences, indeed, it is a window into that other dimension of life toward which we all travel. Diane has suggested that I describe my life before my NDE, which was at age 14, but also to describe what it was like while it was happening, and then how it affected my pathway of life. Perhaps I can expand a little bit our insight into that future life by sharing with you what I have learned through my lifelong experience as a medium. Perhaps later, toward conclusion time, I will perhaps give a few spirit messages. I was born in northern Michigan, traditional Amish Mennonite home and family, and as you can see, I made quite a departure from that. No more black. But as a child, and I was the youngest of 8, and there was a 10-year span between my older siblings and myself. I was sort of the unexpected little one who came along, and But I spent a lot of my time out of doors, close to nature. And Petoskey, Michigan is also the home of the Chippewas and the Ottawas. So I had a close relationship with many wonderful Indian friends through whom I learned a great deal beyond or other than what my Christian heritage gave me. And I often wandered around through the wooded area and through the hills, and my Indian guide in the spirit world, whom I called Hanto, often held my hand. So I walked around like this. And many of the people in town would ask my mother why I always held my hand out like this. What was wrong with my hand, my arm? And my mother very lovingly would try to explain that it was an imaginary friend. Well, Hanto was not imaginary at all. She was a very real part of my early life, and she still is often with me. But in the evening hours, my father would gather us all together, and we'd sit in a little circle. He, with his beautifully modulated, deep, full voice that was a very slight German accent, would read the Bible and speak to us. And his voice to me was very hypnotizing. So I would find myself many times, and remember, I'm just a little girl, but as I look back, I know that I felt hypnotized, and it was during that time I would often go out of the body, and I'd go into that unseen realm and see the beauties of the spiritual world. I often was with my so-called imaginary friends, my Indian guide Hanto, but I also often saw my relatives in the other world, most of whom I didn't know because many of them passed over long before I came into the world. But it was between the age of 8 and 10 and 12 probably that we began to have a lot of psychic phenomena, often physical phenomena that took place in our home. There'd be rappings, tappings, levitation of objects, and usually I was the last one at the table, and as I would dash in and take my little seat, and I sat in a high chair for many years because we didn't have other chairs, but I'd jump up in my little high chair, and the end of the table, this big, heavy, old oak table, would levitate. Silverware would move around, and glasses would move. And so it was quite an experience. And I won't say it was frightening. I was entertained by it, but not everyone in my family was. But it was also during that time that oftentimes we heard independent voices, that someone would speak to us just out of the thin air. I now know that as a phase of mediumship, but at the time, of course, I didn't understand it. But my father would always turn to his Christian Bible to find the answers. And if he could find anything very close to what phenomena we were experiencing, if he could find it in the Bible, which usually he could, it was all right. But I got prayed over an awfully lot. And my father was a very deeply spiritual person, and as was my mother. And so they prayed for me probably every day and every evening during our little family circles. But it was at the age of 12 when my father, who became a land surveyor and loved that type of work, he was sort of a jack of all trades and probably master of 9/10 of them. But he did take up land surveying, and because he liked it so well, he decided to move to Florida where he could do it all year long, and he wouldn't have to stop work in the winter time. That move was a very difficult one for me because I loved the woods, I loved the farmland all around, the close-knit community that was there. And, you know, as a little girl, one thing I loved to do was go in and out of churches. And I don't know if you read The Priest and the Medium, but I think there's a story in this that tells about how I used to sneak out of the house at night. And, you know, today teenagers and young kids sneak out for what? Drugs and, well, all kinds of other things. But I snuck out because I wanted to go to church. And I'd go down to the Foursquare Gospel Church to get saved. I didn't know what it meant, but there was that little communion wine, and then I'd go up and be saved. And I thought that was the greatest experience ever. So anyway, I got in trouble for that, but I missed that. And I missed our community, our close-knit community, and my church that was so special to me. And when we moved to Florida, because of course there was no Mennonite community there where we lived. So, and I also attended public school then. So the whole life and lifestyle was very, very different. We sort of moved from some of our old traditional ways to a more modernistic type of life. And I found that so difficult, and I went to public school, and then I heard about this very corruptive thing called high school and college. We only went through the 8th grade, but I desperately wanted to go on to higher education. And the only way I could continue to do that was to leave home. So before I was 14, I left home. I went to the land of Florida, which was probably about 8 or 10 miles from where we lived. And I found 3 part-time jobs. And I was able to rent a room for $5 a week. You can see how old I am. And I also, after a short time of saving money, I was able to buy an old car. Now, I didn't have a license or anything, but I didn't know I was supposed to have one. And I didn't know anything about that, but I bought this old car that cost me $10 a month. $10 a month. And so I was able to get off the street and not walk from one job to another at night. And if you read this book, you'll see the 3 jobs that I had. But anyway, and part of it's a little bit funny. But anyway, in the midst of all of this, I became very, very depressed, deeply depressed, very lonely, very alone. I was going to school. I enrolled myself in school. I was working 3 part-time jobs. And I didn't know the ways of the world. I'd never been in situations where people talked about one another, they were unkind to one another. I'd never been exposed to anything but love within a home and family and relationships. And to experience that was very, very harsh for me. So anyway, I became very, very depressed and felt very alone. So I knew I wanted to leave this world. I just knew I wanted to go on. And so I prayed to God to accept me into His kingdom, which was my terminology at that time. And I saved my money and was able to finally purchase some sleeping pills. And one night when I was ready and after prayer, would you believe, and tears and sorrow and pain, I ingested a handful of them. I knew I was going to die, which is what I wanted. I really wanted to die. I didn't want any more of this world. It was too difficult. It was too hard. And I was so depressed. And so after I took the pills, I found myself moving out of my body. And folks, so many of you have had NDEs talk about the tunnel of light. I didn't see the tunnel of light. I was in the tunnel of light. And I felt surrounded by light and love. And I moved upward and outward into that other realm of life. I saw the most beautiful trees, the most beautiful landscape that you could ever imagine. Beautiful flowers everywhere. I saw beautiful animals, smiling faces filled with joy and love. I heard music as I'd never heard before. And I heard what I think is referred to as that heavenly choir. And it probably didn't last very long, but it seemed like a long, long time to me. Did you feel that way when you had your NDEs? But it felt like I was out there in this other realm exploring. And I found myself going to places that I had seen before and out-of-the-body experiences as a little girl, because sometimes I was drawn to groups of people where there were discussions and a dialogue philosophically, which I didn't understand at the time. Or then I'd go to another place where healing was taking place, another place where artists were working, or where there was the creation of music. And I saw this life so full, so creative, so filled with light and love. And I thought, oh, this is so beautiful. And I thought, oh my God, why did I do this to myself? I'm so grateful I did. But I've got to get back into my body because I want to share with the world what this is like. I wanted so desperately to come back into my body. And I could see actually that what is often called the silver cord, and it's like an umbilical cord between the spirit body and the physical body. But it was stretched as I moved through all of these magnificently beautiful places, so filled with light and love. but I could see this, and I pulled myself back with that through different layers, and it is sort of like layers or planes of energy and light. And I saw several people with me, and none of whom I really knew, but they looked so wise and so beautiful. And so anyway, I looked down upon my body, and I was aware of several entities whom I thought were physicians, and they were working on my body to sort of kneading my body and making sort of, I guess what I now know as a healing pass over the body. But as they did this, my body was releasing all the poison I had placed there. So when I came back into the body, I was quite shocked, because here I'm lying in my own feces and vomit, and it was pretty, well, I won't describe that any further, but anyway, I finally, when I gathered my energy, I was able to get into the bathroom and take a shower. I later gathered up all the sheets and put them in the bathtub to soak and to wash. And then I came back to the bed, and I just laid down, and I went into sort of a deep sleep, a trance-like state, and I don't know if that was from the spiritual energies or a residue of the pills that I had taken. I don't know, but I felt in a trance-like state. And after a while, a woman appeared to me, and I had seen her in the other world, but she stood at the foot of my bed, and just a beautiful aura of light that surrounded her, just so beautiful. And I could just feel the energy of love and healing and upliftment, and I knew that she was there to assist me. And as she came to the foot of my bed, she said and she came around to the side of my bed then, and she touched my forehead, touched my face and my hands, and she said, "If you will follow me, I will lead you into a new way of life. If you will follow me, I will lead you into a new way of life." I didn't know what she meant, of course, but I went back to sleep for just a little bit. And I finally, still in sort of a daze, got myself dressed. I got in my little car, and this was an old car, but I had no problems with it at all. But I got into my little car, and I drove about 10 miles away. I had no idea where I was going, but this beautiful woman led the way, and I ended up in Casadega, Florida. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Casadega. It's a spiritualist community, and years ago was very much like Lilydale. It's sort of not so much anymore, but it was a lot like Lilydale and a sister community. So I'd never heard of spiritualism. I didn't know what a medium was or a healer, but I was riding around through this little villages and all these signs: medium, healer, counselor, spiritual counselor, and so on. So I went by a particular house, a little white house, and my car stopped for no apparent reason. It just stopped. And so anyway, I started up again, and I drove around, circled around through the little village again. I went by that same house again, and my car stopped again. And I didn't think anything of it yet. But then once again, as I circled around, my car stopped there. And I thought, well, I guess I'm supposed to go here for some reason. And I read this sign, Wilbur Hall, medium, healer. Okay, so, and I want you to know I was very shy, extremely shy and timid. And I also had a problem with my speech, and that I stammered and stuttered quite severely at times. But I finally got the nerve, still with the spirit woman with me, and I knocked on the door. The door opened, and a gentleman stood there, and he spoke to me, and he said, I don't know who you are or where you've come from, but they told me you were coming. And I thought, they? And then I thought about this. Of course, they told him I was coming. And so he invited me in, and I was very shy, but I did go in, and I had a seat on his beautiful screened-in porch, and I felt very comfortable. And he said, you don't have to talk to me, I just want to talk with you. And I guess he could sense that I was hesitant to say very much. But he began to tell me about the principles of spiritualism, the belief in God, the brotherhood, the sisterhood of all humanity, the golden rule, the continuity of life after death, and the communication between the two worlds. And I thought, I know all this. I was thinking this. This is what I know. And so, anyway, he said, I want you to try an experiment. And he took a ring off of his finger. He handed it to me. And he said, I want you to tell me what you sense and feel as you hold this ring. Well, and of course, those of you who are familiar with psychic phenomena, you will know that that's, it's not mediumship, it's a form of psychic ability called psychometry, is reading from the touch of an object. So I touched it, and I could see a lot of things about him which I related to him. And suddenly, the woman who appeared to me before appeared, and it was more, I would say it was more like a materialization, as opposed to my seeing her clairvoyantly in her spiritual form. She was just as solid and as could be as she stood there, and I immediately knew her name was Rose. And as I spoke her name, Wilbur said to me, I know Rose. And I said, yes, she was your teacher. And he said, yes, she was responsible for bringing him into spiritualism and helping him to unfold his spiritual gifts of mediumship and healing. So I was able to communicate with her and tell him a few other things, some messages from her. And he sat there with tears in his eyes. He was so moved by that, as I was, of course. And so that was my first entry into the spiritualist community. And when we say spiritualism is simply the opposite of materialism when you understand it. And yes, it is an organized religion as well. It's a science of philosophy and a religion. And I am an ordained minister and certified medium healer and commissioned healer within the organization. But probably most of us don't believe so much in organized religion, right? But if you think of the word spiritualism, it is the opposite of materialism. And I'm sure that all of you, unlike my atheist friend, you're probably all spiritualists with small s, right? Moving towards spiritualism, probably with the big S. But anyway, that was my entry into this. And so I continued my jobs that I had, continued high school, but every day I went to Wilbur Hull's house to read and to study. I remember the first book he gave me to read was called The Rock of Truth. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. You know it? It shook me. It shook me so badly from my old Orthodox teaching, because here I was still carrying my little New Testament with me everywhere, and I thought everything I needed to know was in that. Okay, so I left his house with The Rock of Truth that you know, and I read about halfway through, and I thought, oh my God, the devil's got me. And so I went back to him, and I said, I'm going to pray for you, because this this is not good. Well, as I said that to him, he went into, he was a wonderful trance medium. So he was entranced by Rose and then a succession of other entities who spoke through him. And I want you to know that was the most magnificent hour of my life. I learned so much, and I learned more about God and Spirit and the universality of truth, as opposed to my narrow little pathway that I had at that point in my life. So I left with that book, and I finished reading it, and I read all the other Arthur Findlay books that you're probably familiar with, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then I just couldn't get enough, but I went to his house probably every day for instructions. And so within less than a year, I was doing public platform message work, and my early work as a speaker was all in deep trance. Some of you may be familiar with Waniwak, Wisconsin. Anybody know Waniwak? Okay. I spoke there when I was about 14 and a half or 15 or so, and Wilbur was supposed to be the speaker, but he said, I need your help up there. He was in a wheelchair, by the way, but he said, I need your help, so I want you to sit up here beside me. So he insisted that I do that, and so I sat beside him, and he was wheeled up to the platform to speak, and he said, I'm not going to speak to you today. And then he introduced me, and I go, oh my, what am I going to do? And I was literally trembling, and all of a sudden, I had this swirling-like sensation. I felt myself leaving, and I could feel the presence of a spirit doctor who then entranced me and spoke through me for, I think it was about 45 minutes. And I remember when I came out of that at the end of the service, a little woman down the front row said, oh, wasn't that a magnificent lecture? But wasn't that strange to hear that deep German-sounding voice coming through that little girl? But anyway, that was the beginning of my public work, and I've been moving forward with it ever since. And I have found that through the years of my work, probably the thing that I love most of all is healing. And the word healing simply means to be made whole. It's bringing into balance the body, mind, and spirit, isn't it? And it's making the person whole or holy. Okay? And so I love healing, and I work with magnetic healing and also with my spirit guides and doctors who work through me to bring healing to others. But I've also used my ability in dowsing, which I don't see as mediumship. I see that more as a psychic type of thing. And I don't believe that when I've worked with, are all of you familiar with dowsing? Yes? It's a psychic location and I worked for Phillips Petroleum Company for many years, and worked with a location of gas and oil for them. I don't know if I would do that again, because I don't know if I want to do that to the earth. But it was a great experience, and I was very privileged to have worked with some wonderful geologists, and some of them learned dowsing also during that period of time. But a good dowser is successful 9 out of 10 times, while a geologist is 1 out of 10. So think of the economy of that. Okay, so that was in my early work. And I've also worked a lot with the police and location of missing people and helping to solve crimes, which isn't my favorite work. I had a call, as Diane knows, this morning from a police department to locate an 11-year-old boy who was missing. And so I'll be working on that again later tonight. I have a feeling he's found by now, but anyway, and very much alive. That's a good one, because so often when I do that type of work, it's not good in that way. But my favorite work, of course, is that of helping individuals and giving readings and helping to connect them with their departed loved ones in the other world. And helping to bring the healing that comes from that. You know, we often say that the real work of a medium is to give the proof of the continuity of life. And that's what a medium does, to bring proof of the continuity. However, mediumship does so much more than that. That proof of continuity and that communication with our departed loved ones brings healing, it brings upliftment, it brings reassurance, it brings that consolation of that continuous companionship of our departed loved ones. And it does so much more. But also, it helps us to, can't wait just a minute. And I was just going to give you a message, but oh well. But when you think of what happens when you really have that awareness of life's continuity, it changes your life just like your NDE changed your life and gave meaning and purpose to it all. So that's a favorite thing and all my daily activities that I love doing. And I was hoping that maybe I could give a few messages. I don't know how much time we have here, but I'd like to, and also I teach people to develop their own ability, because I believe everyone is psychic, and I believe that everyone can experience mediumship. I don't think that everybody could be a medium all the time, any more than we could all be musicians or artists. But we have that quality within us that gives us that. And so it is so wonderful to have meditation groups where we do different exercises to develop that ability. And I imagine you have some of those here. Someone spoke of the Church of the Spirit in Maurice Coverson. Are several of you here from there? Oh, okay, wonderful. Okay, and I'm sure they have wonderful unfoldment classes there. I spoke there many, many years ago when Ernest Shanefield, do you remember him? I think he was the founder of that church, wasn't he? That really goes back. But anyway, so I used to serve there frequently, way in the years past. But there are a lot of wonderful spiritualist churches around where, in addition to groups like this, you can really develop your spiritual gifts. And again, all of you have them to some degree. And I wonder if we might move from this to any questions that you may have about mediumship, specifically no personal questions, but about mediumship. Yes, do you have a question?
My question is that if you were developed at an early age and then had some series of accidents that happened along the way, is that transitory time of your healing put you at a place where you will go back to where your abilities used to be? I just experienced an injury 3 years ago, and it kind of interrupted some more of my greater abilities. But I think that the time that I've been healing has put me in a different place.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. It'll do that. Absolutely. And of course, at age 14, I hadn't lived very much, right? So I know Diane asked me to speak about how it changes your life. It gave me life. And it was a calling that I think I felt before then, but I didn't know how to name it or how to identify it. But it was my calling then immediately afterwards, because I wanted to tell everybody about the other world. But as I understand your question, you're talking about from an injury that it interrupted the pathway, and then it put you on a little different track then?
Yeah,
yes.
I went laterally. I was a little bit more expanded a few years before this happened, and then it kind of put an interference in my nervous system. Mm-hmm. I learned a lot about the interference, but it's still a little different than what I used to experience. Meaning the expansiveness that I used to feel has just transferred laterally to a different path. And I just thought maybe you could speak about that if you sense it.
Well, I think if you have it once, it's still there. It's like little children who are so psychic, so telepathic, and so aware of the non-physical world, aren't they? And then we become educated out of it because our school system is mostly a left brain process, and what we experience with this is more of a right brain process. So that shift, you see, if you once had that, it can be reawakened within you, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a matter of effort and creating the condition in your life that will help you to find that attunement. But it's there, absolutely. All right, yes.
How do people know if they have a calling? I mean, you had a guide or someone that you saw as a child and you had a near-death experience. So do you think certain people are chosen to do this, or is everyone supposed to be doing this? Or
Well, I believe could everybody hear the question? Okay. I believe we're moving into a time, a new cycle of time. Everything in the universe moves in a cyclic rhythm and pattern, doesn't it? And there are waves of change. And, if you look back to the time of Mesmer, and then Swedenborg, and then Andrew Jackson Davis, those were times of waves of new awareness and new understanding. And then the birth of modern spiritualism in 1848. And then that new thought movement that occurred about the same period of time. So we see historically the consistent reawakening and waves. It's like waves. And I believe we're moving into a wonderful cycle that brings a great new wave of extended awareness into other dimensions. I believe we're headed toward that. So there are more and more people, just like the groups here, who are really moving toward the awareness of their psychic and mediumistic ability. And more people are moving that direction. I think that if you feel the calling, you know it. A calling is something you know in your heart and soul. You know, and there's no question. And you move with that every moment, every day, with every breath and every thought, every action, every deed. You see, you feel that. And I do believe that there are some individuals who might feel sort of a calling, but they're not quite sure. And that's because they're getting in their own way. Our ego gets in the way of a lot of things, folks, doesn't it? So when you get your ego out of the way and you move with what your heart and soul is telling you, you see, you act upon it. Okay? All right, yes?
I was wondering, and I get stuck here a lot, because a lot of times what I feel I need to do is kind of ground or cleanse in order to see clearly, in order to connect. Do you do anything special to prepare yourself to do a reading, or
Okay, do I do anything special to prepare to do for reading? Always. Always. I always have my time of meditation and prayer at 8 o'clock every morning, and then I have prayer before every reading, and I invite the person who's receiving the reading to be prayerful with me. And, I had an interesting experience not too long ago of a woman who was sent to me, referred to me by a Christian minister. And this woman was just grieving so deeply because of the death of her husband. And so when she came in, she wanted to be there, but she was also a little bit, And she said, the first thing she asked me was if I believed in Jesus and if I was a Christian. And, I'm really more of a universalist, so it sort of set me back to have someone ask that question. But I said, I believe in the teachings of Jesus. I believe in his beautiful teachings, and that seemed to satisfy her. So I found myself even in offering prayer with her before I started the reading, in the name of the or not in the name, according to the teachings of Jesus, the truth within the teachings. And I found that very comfortable. But isn't it interesting how religions can divide us? And the very word means binding back to God, doesn't it? So I think we have to be very broad in our thinking. But to go back to your question, what do I do? It's always prayer and meditation, always. And I never give just off-the-cuff readings without, just because I may sense something or feel something. And I also don't believe in invading anybody's privacy, out socially or whatever. I never do that at all. If a person wants a reading, they can ask me and we set a time for it, and after that time of quietness and meditation, we do a reading. Yes, does that answer your question?
Yes.
I really believe that for anyone who is seeking unfoldment and further development in this, and I say further development because mediumship, if you are a medium or a psychic or a healer, those gifts constantly change. It never stays the same. But it changes as you grow and as you unfold. Let's see, you had a hand up, yes.
Well, you say you're the youngest of 8.
Uh-huh.
And I know that my sister doesn't get me. So my question to you is, what happened with your relationship with your family, who were obviously very devout, as you changed?
My relationship with my family changed. I was no longer the little baby sister. Okay. Quite frankly, I didn't have a real close relationship with them for many years. But let's see, one sister-in-law, 2 sisters, and I have just one sister still living on the earth plane. And they all became very open and sought out more information about spiritual growth and unfoldment. The others I had a sort of a normal relationship with, but not deep in a sense of sharing things spiritually at all. My mother and father, though, and this is a beautiful part, my mother and father became spiritualists very late in their life. I had a church in Orlando, Florida. It was called what? Anyway, SRS, Society of, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of it, but I left that in 1980, so that's okay. I'm 75 now, so anyway, I can forget a little bit, right? But anyway, they became members of that, and members of the National Spiritualist Association of Churches, but it was quite late in their life. My mother, God bless her, lived till she was 100. My dad was 97. And they just loved spiritualism and the times that we would spend together in communication with their loved ones in the other world and their guides, their teachers. So that was a beautiful experience with them. And I know they took that with them to the other side. And I feel their presence so very, very often. And that's always a joy to me. All right, yes, your question?
I love what you have to say. I just wondered, how was it with your Catholic priest?
Oh, how was it with my Catholic priest? I have the most wonderful Catholic priest. My husband, who is a former Jesuit priest, and when we use the word former, he always corrects, because he says a priest is always a priest. And he went through the process of, with the Vatican, of leaving the priesthood, and so on. So he's still Catholic, but not very much. And he's a very deep philosophical thinker. And we have, we discuss religion, we discuss philosophy and the scientific aspects of it. He loves mediumship. He's a very gifted healer. And there are certain parts of Catholicism that he still holds on to. But I can understand that because he was raised in the shadow of the church. And, the interesting thing, I have to share this with you quickly. Years ago in my earlier life, I traveled around the country and served various spiritualist churches and centers. And I had a motorhome, and I loved taking pictures of country churches, any church. I had a whole album full of photographs of churches. Well, when I came across the plains across Kansas, are some of you familiar with the Cathedral of the Plains? It's a beautiful cathedral with two big spirals upward to the heavens. And I had a photograph of that in Victoria, Kansas. I put it on the front of my picture album. And lo and behold, many years later, I met Wayne, who grew up in Victoria. His grandfather was a chief stonecutter of that old historic church. And we go back to Victoria every summer over the 4th of July for the Knoll family reunion. And I always go to Mass with him there because I just love the church and the architecture is so beautiful. And the homilies I've heard there are very, very nice. So I like it. And Wayne laughs at me because I call it my calisthenics class because they're up and down and up and down. But he's not offended by that. We laugh about it. Anyway, so how do I get along with my Catholic priest? I can tell you every morning when I wake up, I give thanks to Spirit, to God, for my wonderful soulmate. And he's just a wonderful companion, wonderful husband. And we share life so beautifully together. Where's the gentleman who spoke earlier about so often people in this field of work really have problems in personal relationships or love relationships? So gentlemen, yeah. Tell me again what you said.
Well, it just seems like a lot of people that are on a spiritual quest, especially psychics, mediums, intuitives like that, have a hard time sustaining one-on-one relationships. And it becomes a series of relationships. Not that that's wrong. Sometimes it apparently is more healthy than staying with somebody that's not fitted. Mm-hmm. But I was, I guess, enrolled by you that it can be, that you did it, which is really nice.
Yeah, we did it. Yes. I think that's true of so many mediums and psychics I know, but I know some who've had really nice relationships too. So,
well, they were nice. They just ended.
Well, Wayne often says that it's our love of God and our quest for truth that we both love and we're dedicated to. Therefore, it's not a problem. And, neither one of us feel that we have all the answers. Mm-hmm. And one thing in my pathway of life, I feel we need to always be open to restatement. Whatever we believe now may not be what we believe tomorrow or the next day. You want to, on your pathway, always be open to new understanding. Do you agree? Mm-hmm. Always. So you want to never think that you've got it all and you know it all, because we don't. We wouldn't be here on the earth plane if we did. So we want to always be open, no matter what we believe and no matter how strongly we believe it. Okay? Yes, over here.
You talked about spirit just a little while ago. You talked about the person materializing in front of you, and then you talked about the other type of spirits. I have a question about that. If a person appears in front of you, they will talk to you, but that's what happens. I want to know if that spirit is in that same place? Do they move around, or are they kind of there for a reason? Also, you have to be afraid of them. I mean, spirits in general, who knows? Are they good, are they bad spirits? That's one question. And the other question is, if death is so wonderful, which some of us have experienced, total bliss, why don't we just then do away with ourselves?
Okay. You know, what I shared with you today in my near-death experience, I very rarely talk about, except in certain groups. I may share the experience, but I don't talk about it as a suicidal attempt or whatever, because I don't want to glorify it, because that may not happen to everybody, you see. And so I don't want to glorify that process. However, if you do have a near-death experience, then that's going to alter your life and change it. And you ask about so-called evil spirits, maybe? Or is there anything to fear? I can tell you in all of my many years, let's see, I'm 75 now, I started working publicly at 15. I'm not very mathematical because I still say I'm 39. You know, from all of those years, I can tell you I've never come in contact with a spirit where I would feel fear, ever, ever, ever. I've come in contact with few people I fear, and there are spirits in the body, but I also think that we, in a way, have charge over what we attract, okay? And if we're loving and kind and compassionate, moving in a spiritual pathway, that's what we attract to us, you see. I had one experience years ago when I lived in Orlando. I was in my office and at night, and I just had an uneasy feeling, and I felt I needed to leave. And so I opened the door, locked up tight, started walking out the door through it was a garden area there, and toward my car, when this big burly man came walking across the parking lot toward me. I mean, he was a big guy with a big beard and sort of, well, anyway. As he came toward me, I knew that I needed to be very, very cautious in what I did. I felt the presence of spirit so strongly, and as he approached me, ready to attack me, my arm went up on his shoulder. My arm was just as strong and stiff as could be, and it prevented him from attacking me. And I just looked in his eyes, I talked to him, I just kept talking, I have no idea what I said. He sat down, and I just kept talking. I kneeled down beside him, and he began to cry like a little baby, and I felt at that moment such compassion for this broken soul. And within a very brief time, here comes a police car with the flashing lights looking for this man who was a rapist and a murderer and had escaped from jail. So they picked him up, of course. And, you know, to this day, and this may sound sort of unusual, but I feel nothing but compassion. I can still see his eyes and his face and how he was when he was ready to attack me. But I know that Spirit put me in that pathway. I just know it. And I actually went to see him in jail a few times after that. And he was finally sent to another place. But I went there to talk with him and hopefully give him some light.
Did it change him?
It seemed to, and the people in the jail said that it did, but who knows? I don't know. But anyway, and I didn't follow through beyond that because quite frankly at the time, I didn't really want to know much more. But I think that sometimes Spirit might put us in a pathway, you see, And I felt when I left the office that night, I knew there was danger outside, but I also knew that the power of spirit was so strong that I would be all right. So, but I can tell you, I've never come, going back to your question, I have never found a spirit that I've been afraid of or fearful of. I've had a few times when I've come in contact in readings with sort of unevolved souls, but I can tell you at the moment of death, every soul is going to gradually evolve more and more toward the light. Okay? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yes.
What is your opinion of using a Ouija board to talk with the other side?
Okay, my opinion of the Ouija board. You know, there are some very wonderful books, classic books that started. You're probably familiar with the Stuart Edward White books. Do you know them? Our Unseen Guest, The Unobstructed Universe, the Betty book. Those three books, actually, and then he wrote many others also. But Stuart Edward White and his wife started out with the Ouija board, but they evolved beyond that. And I think that if you approach the Ouija board spiritually, can you do that? And it's not fun and games. See, you're going to attract to yourself what you want. And I think the problem comes when people just make it a big game. I would not recommend it at all, because it's sort of a playground sometimes for unevolved spirits. But it can be, according to the user of it, be a stepping stone to something higher and better.
And what would that be? What would that evolve to?
Oh, wow. Read the Stuart Edward White books. Folks, all spirit communication should lead to a deeper understanding of life and a philosophy of life that helps you to grow. That's the main purpose of communication with the other world. First, you want the proof of the continuity of life. You want to receive the healing, the consolation, the companionship of loved ones in the other world. But as you grow with that, you want to receive the higher lessons, the philosophy of life itself, which they teach us from the other world.
So the book that you're recommending is what?
Okay, start with Our Unseen Guest. Go to The Unobstructed Universe, and then the Betty, the E-T-T-Y book, those three, and read them in that order, and they will really help you to evolve in your spiritual growth.
Okay, so you're saying that they got to the point where they no longer needed to use the Ouija board?
Oh, absolutely.
They would just hear it in their heads, or?
It came in writing, not automatic writing, inspirational writing, but Betty became a trance medium, and the spirits would speak directly to them, and that was transcribed, so that they received the lesson material, you see, the philosophy. And folks, don't dabble in this. Don't just dabble. Be real students of it, okay? And know that there's a pathway that lies ahead that has to do with your personal growth and your ability to serve others and to share with others. Okay? Yes.
What do you say to people who swear that Satan and the devil are definitely entities?
What would I say
And that
to
you
a
could,
person who really believes in the devil? I would probably say something as simple as we all have a right to our opinion, and your opinion is not mine. This is what I believe. Okay, you know, I love it when certain religious groups come around and knocking on my door and want to say to me, come in. I open the door widely and I say, come on in. Because I think it's a wonderful opportunity to share what we do know and understand. And they may be very close to it. I'll bet you one thing, when they leave, they know that there's another way of thinking and being. And that's one reason I'm so grateful that I was raised with those biblical teachings. And I know we have an open forum at the center quite often. I have the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment, and my church in Orlando is a spiritual research society. Okay? But anyway, at the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment, we have a lot of open forums and discussions, and people from other religions come in and they want to challenge us. And I think it's fun. I love it. I'm never offended by that. And if they want to believe in the devil or something else, that's their pathway. But they'll leave with understanding their other ways of thinking and being. I had some years ago, a Baptist minister who came into my classes. He gave a false name and identity, and he sat through a series of 10 classes. And as we went into the 11th one, he said, you know, I truly feel, and he told me that he had deceived us with his identity and so on, and that he was really a Baptist minister. And he said, I have come to realize that to really understand the Christian scripture, that you have to understand psychic phenomena and spiritualism. And anyway, he left his church, became a parapsychologist, and very involved in parapsychological research. So, and that was sort of fun. I enjoyed that a lot. And years ago, and I don't know if this is in the Priest and the Medium or not, but I was teaching a class it was in the midst of the Bible Belt at Leesburg, Central Florida. And when I arrived for the classes, they told me when I talked to them on the phone from the office, you're going to have a huge group. And they had told me a week or so before to expect a big group of maybe 20 or 25 for my class. Well, I got there, they had to move it to the auditorium because there were over 100 people. But as I approached the building, here were anti-Gehman signs and ministers from the churches in the community who were very opposed to my teaching in the community college. So I invited them in. And I said, why don't you come in and see what it's really about? Well, 5 of them actually stayed and finished the classes, and I still have communication with several of them. So, you know, it's how you approach it. I don't think it's wise to ever force your beliefs on someone, but to be open and very willing to share what you've experienced and what you believe. But also, folks, sometimes when people move into this, they become very, they're afraid to talk about it. But I want to tell you something. You use words, and I've heard it here, and don't be offended, please, because I'm not judging anyone. But I've heard the word bizarre, strange, spooky. I see bizarre, words, strange, spooky. What else? What are some of the other words you use to describe your experiences, folks? Let's elevate it, because when it becomes part of your consciousness as something beautiful, something wonderful, something magnificent, something uplifting and blissful. Do you agree?
Yeah.
That's what other people are going to think about it. So stop thinking that it's weird or strange or spooky or whatever. Bizarre. It isn't. It isn't. This is part of life of the soul. And what's more beautiful than God and the soul and the spiritual pathway? And you know, I don't know how much time I have yet, but okay. I'd like to, are there any other questions? Yes, okay.
Maybe not precise, but it is sometimes really quite overwhelming when you have different beings coming through simultaneously on different realms, such as, for example, angels and then spirits of animals, lower frequencies as well, even though they have positive background, but overlapping with the crossed over relatives and all of them.
And they all descend upon you at once. Okay.
And you're like, would you mind your business? I appreciate what you have, but
Okay. I would say you mind your business. Okay, because I think that when you have that, there are people who are very sensitive to the vibrations of all different, But if you have a close relationship with your guides, your teachers, and the other world, they will help to sort that out. I've heard people talk about having that experience, but I can't say I ever have. But the word angel, folks, simply means a messenger, doesn't it? It means a messenger. So all of our loved ones and even our animal friends can be messengers from the other world. But if you learn to focus your consciousness in one way, you see, and connect not only with the infinite, always first, folks, as Jesus taught, and I believe this, he said, seek ye first the kingdom of God, then all else is added. And there's another passage that's very similar that says that the attunement first with God, or what I call infinite intelligence, and secondly with the angel world or the spirit world. So if you always have that connection out here with the infinite, and then you invite in your guides, your teachers, and then they help to direct that, you see. So you're never going to be overwhelmed. Okay, does that help? Okay.
If you stop asking questions, we might have some messages.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, do it.
Yes.
I like to share this, my experience
Yes.
and my question. I was in Saudi Arabia, worked in the oil company as an oil driller. And I was born in Pakistan to a Muslim family.
Yes.
I am number 5 of 10 children of my parents. And I study Quran according to the custom of Pakistan.
Yes.
I asked the teacher in the madrasa, I say, who is the author of Quran? He said, God is the author. And then I met some Christian missionary in Pakistan, and they was talking about Jesus Christ. And I asked them, what is your holy book? They say, Bible. And I asked them, who is the author of the Bible? They say, God. And I was surprised, if God is the author of all these holy books, how can author write his own writing against himself? And
Wonderful
I asked
question.
his mullah, and mullah got very upset. He said, no, only Muhammad. I said, that's wrong. And then he said, well, I see this guy is not from San Francisco or New York. He's from Middle East, and Muhammad is from Middle East too. How can this be? And they say, I have very bad question.
I think this is a wonderful question.
Islam, and this is a great punishment to you asking this question.
Well,
Yes.
I don't have all of the truth, of course. None of us do. But my understanding is that all of the holy books, whether it's a Quran, whether it's the Holy Bible, what are some of the Torah, what are some of the others of the major religions of the world, I believe are truly inspired work through the mind of man to humanity. And I believe there's truth in all of them. To say that God is the author, I think it's the God within those who wrote it. And it's all according to the understanding of that period of time. And as humankind has evolved, they come into a different understanding. You see, while there are basic truths always within those writings, you see, but they don't have to conflict.
Yes, but I was beaten by the mullah because they say I have to pray 5 times a day, and I was not obeying his order because I was praying in the morning and the evening. And one day I was in Saudi Arabia, and the it was pray, they say Allah Akbar, go everybody in the mosque. If nobody go, they beat with the stick.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was there and he said it is prayer time, I have to go to mosque. I said, no, God is everywhere. I go in my home and I pray.
Yes,
He said,
yes.
no, they go there. I said, I'm not going, and he beat me.
Ah,
And I said, why? And he said, if you're not going there, I will beat you more. So he sent me by force to mosque.
oh dear.
I really not enjoy this. Then
Yeah.
I was come back and I cried and I prayed and it come to my mind and I saw this bright light. He said, I am the love and glory.
Ah,
And I thought
So-
understand.
so you had your own spiritual experience through
Yes,
that.
I was left Pakistan. I was deported to that punishment in Pakistan. And when I left Pakistan 20 years ago,
Uh-huh.
I came to Europe, then I America.
Well, I'm happy you're here. I truly believe there's not just one pathway for all humanity. I truly believe that. I think of all religions of the world like spokes in a wheel. If you look at the outer rim and then those spokes all go to the center, to the hub or the Godhead. But some of those spokes oppose one another, don't they? There's opposition, so there are differences. And I think that what we want to reach toward is sort of the oneness concept. Last year I was very blessed to have had the opportunity to study in India at the University of Oneness. And we did a comparison of all the world religions and came into that realization of oneness, what spiritualism teaches. What I learned there was so beautiful. It was just a different way of expressing what I was already taught and what I believe as a spiritualist. But how beautiful that experience was. And there were Muslims there were Hindus, there were Buddhists, there were people from all the different world religions, and how we all came together in that sense of oneness. And you may want to look into that because there's a oneness movement today that's spreading throughout the whole world. And so it's doing away with some of the things you're talking about, you see, and we don't want any human being to have to worship God in any prescribed way. We want to have our spiritual experiences where we come into attunement with that wonderful infinite intelligence of the universe and come into the recognition that we have that spark of God within our heart and soul, that we are that. And we are not God, but we are a spark of God. So we're part of the overall whole. And through that understanding, we move to still greater growth and unfoldment, to develop our spiritual gifts and talents, to expand our consciousness in ways that we serve one another and love one another always. And I'm feeling a very strong presence of spirit loved ones, and I feel like I want to give a few messages if I have a few moments to do that. Is that okay with everyone? Okay. And I don't want to, I don't want to force that on you because it's a very personal thing when you receive a message. As I was speaking and talking about my own suicidal attempt, I was thinking, was it your grandson? I was thinking of him. And I don't know as I saw him, and he's been gone for such a short time, but I saw a beautiful light, and right now I see a beautiful light that surrounds you. And I know that he's moved into a realm where he's being cared for, where he is loved. And would there be another language spoken a second generation back? Because I'm hearing another language, not with him, but it feels like it's back in the family tie. No? Well, he's with someone where there's another language spoken. And I see him surrounded by 5, 6 other people, and I just feel that he was lifted up into the light and he's being cared for, still in sort of a state of not quite himself yet, but he will be very soon. And I feel that, oh, okay, all right. What they want you to know is that he did not suffer, because this happened so quickly, and he was just gone, and there were those loved ones who were there for him. And I see a man close to you in the spiritual realm he's not real tall, but he has sort of a tall, sort of slender appearance. And his forehead looks rather wide, very strong lines here. His nose is quite prominent, and then he's a little bit tapered here as I see him. And his hairline is sort of a widow's peak here. Very handsome-looking man as I see him. And I see him as having been there. This is a fatherly, or could be grandfather. I don't know which generation yet. But it's a fatherly protective vibration. But he was there for him as he crossed over. And was there anything about his hair did he have a haircut or a change of hairstyle just before this happened? Yes? Okay, because they're giving me that impression so strongly, and they're giving me that because they want to help to identify him. Okay, and also he did a lot of drawing or sort of doodling, I believe, and they're just showing me stacks of papers and things he left behind. His heart and soul was rather poetic too, and I think that he wrote some poetry that he left behind. Okay, and so I feel he's moving toward greater peace. And I feel that the last couple of months of his life was so difficult because he felt rejected by someone. Do you know anything about this?
No. Surrounded with love.
Family, yes, but there was someone where he felt a very strong attraction and he felt rejected. He was heartbroken. And he's not blaming anyone at all, but just a series of experiences. But that poetry and that love is so beautifully there, and I feel that's going to manifest in some way through, okay, a mother, perhaps, someone else who's going to be writing, because he's going to be writing through someone. You'll see. Okay, and he's moving toward peace and his healing. He's all right, and he likes his hair. So whatever that's about, I don't know. But I hope you feel that touch. I hope you feel that presence.
I'm waiting for it.
Yes, all right. And you'll have your personal experience of connecting with him too. Okay, now, I want to talk with someone over here who would know the name of Margaret. I hear the name of Catherine, and I hear the name of Elizabeth. I don't know quite where to go with this, but these three people, let me hear your voice. Say hello.
Hello, I'm Kathleen Ann Elizabeth.
And who's Margaret?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you for answering. You know all three names?
She's Margaret, I'm Kathy, and my sister-in-law is Elizabeth.
In the spirit world?
No.
No, thank you.
Okay.
No? Okay, who else knows the three names? Okay, I'll find you, just a moment. Okay, it's Margaret, Kathy, and Elizabeth. You know, I feel I want to come back to you. Let me hear your voice again.
Hello?
Okay, because I see a light that draws me to you. And those three names manifest so beautifully in your aura. And then I see a man who, in the spirit world, who crossed over, and I feel he had, among other things, a diabetic condition.
Okay.
and trouble through the feet and legs. And I feel that just prior to his crossing over, there had been some discussion of a possible amputation. Do you understand who this is?
I didn't know about the amputation. I know he was supposed to have surgery.
Okay, because I think there was some discussion, I feel like it never happened, but there was some discussion of this. And as I see him close to you, he's very interested in your life and your welfare. And I also feel someone who comes very close to me now, where there was a lot of coughing and congestion through the heart and lung area of the body. And as I feel this the presence of this, they seem to want you to know that they have found a sense of peace, because while the body was a lot of discomfort, but I also feel there was an emotional condition. You understand? And they're telling me that they have worked through that. And I see a hand that just goes like this and says, I see more clearly now. I see things more clearly. So this was someone who was very set and fixed in their belief, and it took that time of transition to see more clearly the conditions, okay, of life. And you know, you have something unfolding in the fall they're talking about. And I don't know what you do, but it feels like you want to move in a new pathway, right? And you know, sometimes in giving a message in a group, I'm not as specific as I would want to be, but because it's nobody's business. But anyway, I'm looking into the month of September, and I see some significant changes that has to do with health and physical body. It also has to do with daily activities. It also has to do with income. So all of which I feel is in sort of a planning stage, and you're going to do wonderfully well with this. Go for it.
Thank you.
And I feel as though it's something that you haven't shared with everybody. Okay? So, and I think sometimes when we want things to manifest, it's important to sort of hold it inside of you. Okay? But it's all going to move forward beautifully. Now, I see another man in the spirit world who went out of the body very quickly, very unexpectedly. He was here, quickly gone, and there was a head injury and sort of a crushed feeling through here. This was an accident that took him, but he tells me that he contributed to this by his behavior. You understand? All right. And he's so sorry because of the number of people that he hurt and disappointed, not only in the death itself, but prior to that. Because sometimes he was quite, I want to use the word abusive. Not always. Okay, you understand? All right. And he just brings his love, and he reaches out to other people around you in the material world. Okay, now, moving from that, I want to talk to someone. Okay, where may I go with this? I see a man here who worked for many years with the railroad. Who would know this? I see miles of railroad, and I hear the clanking of the cars and all, and I feel, okay, and Charlie, who's Charles or Charlie connected with this? I don't think it's a relative.
There is a man who I know who was an engineer. His name was Charles.
Okay, he was an engineer and his name was Charles. Okay, because he comes close just now. Just a message of just a greeting.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to hear from him.
Right. Well, he's here, and I like his vibration, his energy, because there's a warmth and there's a directness about him, and he's just so happy to connect with you in this way. And then who is Walter to you? Walter.
That was a great uncle who also worked for the railroad for a short time.
Okay, because Walter is here also?
Not a great uncle, an uncle. Yes.
Okay, all right. And then I see a large initial of B. and I feel I want to say, oh, okay. And I think that's, this has been a long time in coming, it seems.
Yes.
Yes? And I feel this is going to work out well for both of you. And interestingly, I feel that there's going to be sort of a new kind of closeness. And that may seem very unlikely at this moment, but there's a new type of communication and closeness that's going to unfold for the benefit of 3 other people, younger ones.
Microphone in her half.
Okay? It'll be fine. All right. Finally, okay? And then there's a blue car. What about a blue car involved, huh? Okay, well, you'll see in about 6 weeks. Okay, now. All right. No, there's no danger connected with it, no. It's just that I see you in and out of it in a very positive way. Yeah. What?
Sorry, it was just an incident.
Yeah, okay. All right, just a moment. Well, I see a woman here from the spiritual realm who would be about my height. She's heavier, sort of through the middle part of her body, quite heavy. Not really obese, but just a fullness here. She has very pretty eyes, sort of blue-gray eyes. Her hair is gray and is combed back and is pinned up to the back. And it's interesting because I feel that she has 2, 3 dogs with her in the spirit world. And those dogs belong to someone who's here. And I don't know where to go with this, and you may not connect dogs with her, but in your own life, but she has something to do with helping them in the other world. Where may I go with this? Okay, who has 2 dogs who were very precious to them, and then earlier in life, a 3rd dog, earlier. Let me hear your voice.
Hello.
Okay, now, in addition to the animal friends, can you acknowledge the woman I described?
Yes, I can.
Okay, because I don't think she was real fond of a lot of animals when she was here, right? What?
She wasn't.
But she is now. And she's smiling about this because I see her sort of, I see the companionship of these animals with her. And there's also a man by the name of Joe or Joseph who connects with her in the other world. And okay, because they're all here and they're so happy to greet you today. And there's also the name of Marianne, okay. She wants to say hello to you as well. And then I see another woman with sort of reddish hair. And I see her holding a little baby in her arms. And I feel that okay, I'm going to pause just a moment. I should have told you earlier that movement sort of breaks the connection somehow, so sorry, I should have explained that earlier. Let me hear your voice again.
Hello.
Okay. Okay, and the man in military uniform who stands rather tall and a real air of dignity about him and a feeling of pride in serving his country. And I just know that he crossed over in warlike conditions in an airplane. And I don't know as you know him personally, but he's in your family tie, and I think you've heard stories of him, right?
Yes.
Okay, because he comes in with also a greeting, and he tells me to tell you that he's often with you in your daily activities. And you know, you've sort of gone from a person who could You don't care what I say, right? I think you, I think you, as a younger man, I think you had a tendency to be very, can I say, tense?
Okay.
Okay, and sometimes very temperamental.
Oh, yes.
And what he's telling me is that you've learned to soften that and to move in a more harmonious way from within, therefore around you. And he's pleased that you've done this because he's telling me that he was never able to do that. Okay, now, I also want to encourage you with spiritual healing. Have you studied spiritual healing at all?
Yes.
Because I see 3 Native Americans very close to you in the other world. And one brings us wonderful, powerful healing energy. And I want to encourage you to pursue that pathway because you will have the opportunity to assist many people with your spiritual gifts and in collaboration with these wonderful Indian guides.
Thank you.
Okay, God bless you.
Thank you.
All right, now it's time for me to conclude now. I'm getting other vibrations here, folks, and here we are.
Here we are. Boy, are we blessed. Thank you so much. Hopefully we can bring her back again another time. But we also have to look forward to other spiritualists, people who are coming. Janet Nohavik from Lilydale will be here next June. And
she's a wonderful medium, by the way.
She is.
I know Janet quite well. And
she was a former nun. We're going to call, I was going to say. And then Maurice Coverson, the minister from Church of the Spirit, will be our speaker in April. So we have some wonderful things coming up, and not the least of which is Ken James next month, who is also a wonderful message giver. They work and twist his arm a little bit. So please, don't forget next month. Don't forget to take your trash. And have a wonderful month.
thank you for